Um, Now I guess we can jump into Tesla and their battery day, as it's called, which you did most of the digging on this, so go right ahead.
Yeah, so Tesla did, they've been teasing Battery Day for a while. Essentially just them talking about all of the new battery innovations that they've been working on.
Is this the first
Um,
one, or is this like an annual thing? This is the
this
first
is the
one.
first time they've done this, yeah.
Okay.
And it was hilarious how they did it. So it was kind of like, because you could actually go to this event, but it was essentially set up like a drive-in movie theater press conference. So it was like a
It was
whole bunch
pretty
of Tesla
cool.
cars parked out in front of this stage where they had like engineers coming out to talk about the stuff that they're working on.
It's pretty
So
cool.
they announced a few things. The most immediate thing that you'll be able to buy here over the next few months, I think early next year, is the plaid mode Tesla Model S.
Yeah, so this is
So this,
exciting.
yeah, $140,000, so very expensive. But it's a tier above the ludicrous model. So 1100 horsepower, sub 2 second 0 to 60, and a 520-mile range.
It's
Although
pretty
not if
crazy.
you're going 0 to 60 in under 2 seconds every time.
Yeah, I mean, you could do that every time. It's
Yeah.
fun, but everybody knows that that's a bad idea with electric cars for a lot of reasons. To just do that
Yeah.
constantly, but
And what's crazy about this is so they did a lap, they set a new record lap at Laguna Seca.
ooh, okay.
Yeah, so they beat the McLaren P1 with this.
That's pretty insane.
Yeah. It uses 3 motors in this car. Yeah.
Oh my gosh. It's you know, I guess it's just more proof that, electric cars are the leader for this.
Hmm.
And that's been the case is there's been so many companies that are doing petrol cars that are trying to win on the drag strip, and it's like they're not going to be able to. Like they'll leap over Tesla a little bit by pushing everything as hard as they possibly can, and Tesla will be like, we'll just trickle a little more on there.
Yeah, and it's like these companies will push everything to the point of beating Tesla, but it's not in cars they can like produce at the type of scale that Tesla does.
Yeah, yeah, it's like a very
It's like a show
specialized one.
car. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
Um, and then the other thing they announced um, that they say is coming within, I think they said 3 years, so realistically probably 4 to 5. Um, a $25,000 Tesla, which is
Yeah.
crazy already. But that is including self-driving because it is apparently going to be self-driving only.
Yeah, so which is part of how they bring the price down, right?
Yeah.
But that'll be really
Um,
interesting to see.
Now, the big thing as far as achieving this price, though, is that they need to get the price per kilowatt hour of the battery to be half of what it is now. And this is where Battery Day comes in because they talked a lot about batteries, obviously.
Yeah.
So there are essentially 5 things that they are doing that in total bring the cost per kilowatt hour down to less than half of what it is now. So the first thing, this is in fact the most immediate change that we're going to see in Tesla batteries, is a new cell design. So currently, the way that the batteries are set up is they have these like tabs in between each battery cell, and the battery cells aren't super big. Well, what Tesla is doing is they're making much larger cells. They're getting rid of the tabs, and all in all, essentially what they're doing is like cutting costs, reducing the amount of parts, making them less complicated while making them store way more energy, and reducing the electrical paths so the energy transfers much more efficiently. And so, all in all, these cells will lead to 16% higher range and also dramatically increase supercharger times.
Yeah, so it's a very big update here. it's now I guess my question is what can we expect in terms of availability, right? This is
So
still a
this
while out.
no. This is
Okay,
the first thing coming to market, this change. And they are already ramping up production of these new cells.
that's a big deal.
Yeah. So within, I think they said a year, they'll be at, what was it, 10 gigawatt hours? So like there will be cars with this within the year or within a year.
Within a year, yeah.
Yeah,
So
for
that's
sure.
pretty impressive. And as we're seeing range scale up further and further on electric cars, you start to question at what point um, is it, so much range that the argument of not being able to refuel quickly just goes away.
Yeah.
Right, because like once you have a car that can go 500 or 800 miles in
Mm-hmm.
a charge, that you start to go like, why would you want a petrol vehicle? In terms of like being able to fill up quick, why does it matter? It doesn't. And if people like to bring up the comment like, oh well, we're gonna go camping or something like that, right? Like my thought is just bring a high output generator and bring petrol with you at that point in time.
Yeah.
Like if you really need
Well,
more range.
yeah, and then like you pair the increased range with the faster supercharger times, and that becomes even less of an issue.
Yeah.
You're getting closer and closer to, I mean, it's still, a decent much or a significant increase in time to like recharge versus refuel.
Right.
But if they can get that down to you getting a couple 100 miles in 5-10 minutes,
Yeah,
like
then it's
that's
negligible. Yeah.
yeah.
I mean, that's how long you spend
Um
at a gas station.
yeah.
So,
And then the next thing that they talked about was a very, very significant change. So the way that batteries are made right now, the electrode like process or the manufacturing process for electrodes involves using like a liquid solvent to mix the powder and then drying that out, and then you have to then take that solvent and recycle it and stuff. Essentially, it's a lot of work and a lot of machinery. And what Tesla's trying to do is get rid of that entire process and do a dry electrode process rather than a wet electrode process.
which is a huge
And
deal.
yeah, so I would recommend anyone that's interested in this go actually watch a video from Battery Day about this, because like essentially it results in a 10 times reduction in footprint of manufacturing process. And
Yeah.
so like they can take, you know, tons and tons of machines and just get rid of them. Don't need them anymore. Much faster, much cheaper, much simpler process. Once they get the yields right, because that's the big issue right now, is they already have prototype machines that can do this manufacturing successfully, but the yields are so bad it's not viable. But the fact that they even have it successful put them way ahead of anybody else.
Yeah. So I don't know exactly what I want to say about it other than that it's impressive and I would recommend you go watch the video, so that will be in the description. Um Now, we didn't really get a great indication of exactly how long this is going to be in terms of when this happens. But
Yeah, Elon did say before the Battery Day event that it would be at least a couple, or it would be about a couple years before all of this is done. Um, as far as this one goes, this is in my guess is this is going to be the last of the things that they finalize
yeah,
in this list.
yeah, that was kind
Now,
of the way it sounded when watching it. Is that that's just it's at the end of the
yeah,
road for them.
they are currently on generation 4 of the machine to manufacture this, and they expect Gen 6 to be when mass production is viable. So they've been working on this for a while. When they bought Maxwell last year, Maxwell was like at proof of concept stage for this.
Right.
So the fact that they went from proof of concept to it can be done like pretty consistently, just not at the yields that they need, is already like in a year is pretty good.
Yeah, that's already pretty impressive.
Um, yeah, and so like for reference on how significant this is, in the same size like Tesla Gigafactory that would produce 150 gigawatt hours of battery cells,
Mm-hmm.
they could make a smaller building that could do a terawatt hour in the same time frame. So like it is just vastly, vastly improved. This is like
A huge
nothing
jump.
else.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then the next thing they talked about was the anode material for the battery. So they want to use silicon, and silicon is extremely abundant, which is a very good thing when you're trying to mass produce a lot of batteries.
Yeah.
And it does a better job at storing lithium than other materials that have been used. The issue, though, is that the battery or the silicon expands and like starts to crumble and essentially like become like gel almost over time when you go through those charge cycles, and so they need to find a way to deal with that. They are essentially using like a specific type of polymer to deal with that issue. So that'll help further reduce the costs of the battery.
Mm-hmm.
And then the next thing they talked about was the cathode material. This one is very significant. So right now, a lot of battery cells use cobalt for the cathode material. And there's a lot of issues with that. Cobalt's expensive. The way that it's mined is not good for the environment. It is also, there's a lot of ethical issues around cobalt mining and where that's done and who does that and stuff like that. And so they want to move
Been a
away
lot
from
of talk
cobalt.
about
Yeah.
that. Yeah.
And so what they're doing is looking at switching over to nickel when possible. Nickel is still pretty expensive. And so they don't want to use it for everything. They also do need to ramp up mining of it pretty significantly. But they do want to shift more towards that. So what they're going to do is kind of diversify the cathode depending on the product lineup. So for like long cycle life batteries, so think like utility level storage, full self-driving cars for taxi services, things you'd want to just have running as long as possible.
Mm-hmm.
They're going to use iron. And then for things that are focused on like higher capacity, so like long range cars, power walls, things like that, they're going to use nickel and manganese as the cathode. And then for things that need long range but are also very mass sensitive, that's where they're going to go essentially as much nickel as they can for the cathode. And so that would be like Cybertruck and the Tesla Semi.
Yeah, which excites me because I'm still hoping to get a Cybertruck at some point.
Yeah.
So.
And then they want to do the mining for the US cars in the US and the recycling for this material in the US for the US cars, because a big thing for Tesla is like, so the reason that they're building factories in the US, in China, in Europe, is ultimately it's cheaper for the consumer if you don't have to ship cars around. It's better for the environment if you don't have to ship cars and material around as much. So you don't want to be moving something from, China to the U.S. when you could just mine it in the U.S. Like you cut out all of that transportation cost. And since Tesla's doing it all in-house, they can kind of do whatever they need to as far as like, obviously once they have like Tesla Semi up, for example, Tesla can prioritize giving themselves their own semi trucks to drive it around the US, that type of thing.
Yeah.
Um, and so they want to essentially mine the stuff where it's needed. Um, and then the other big thing that they talked about with this is about the lithium. So there's a lot of lithium in clay. And the issue with getting it from clay is that there's generally a pretty significant environmental cost with how that was done previously, and it's not very cheap. But Tesla has apparently found a more environmentally friendly way to do that by using table salt, I guess. They didn't really talk much about how it works, but apparently you could throw some table salt on your clay and get some lithium out of it. I don't know.
I think that's exactly how it works. So if you get a
Yeah.
big pile of clay on your
You
desk,
just like salt
just
bay it.
salt it. Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. And then at that point in time, now you're rich.
Yeah.
You
That's
become the salt man.
just go buy a bunch of clay and just salt it.
It seems really, in fact, it's so simple. I don't understand why people aren't just doing it and selling it to Tesla, like manual labor, man.
Yeah.
It would make more sense to me, but I don't know, whatever.
Yeah. That's clearly how it works.
I mean, that's
And
kind of how it
then
was implied. No.
yeah. And then the last thing that they talked about was they called it cell vehicle integration. So essentially, they've been working on like a new architecture for their vehicle for a while now. And so they're changing a few things. For one, they have apparently like the largest casting machine in the world, and they're doing like single piece casting for the front and the rear of the car.
Interesting.
And so this is going to result in the example they showed was the underbody, the rear underbody cost being reduced by 40%, which any part of a car, especially a big portion of the car, like the back underbody, that you can cut by 40%, that's pretty significant. And then they also can, with this new architecture and this new casting method, reduce the amount of parts per car by about 79, which cuts complexity, makes it easier to manufacture, makes it cheaper overall. So it's just all around a win to be able to do that. And then part of this new design is doing something very different. So right now, you kind of have to, within where the battery is stored, add in structure for the car around the batteries. So the batteries are not part of the structure, they just exist within it. They're just stored there. Well, what
Hmm.
Tesla wants to do is actually have the batteries, these new like larger battery cells, be a part of the structure of the car.
And
And
that's
so
to
they
help
will
reduce
actually,
cost, right?
yes. So instead of having to build structure around the batteries, you're just taking batteries that are already there and using them as the structure. You're just building batteries that can be done, that can be used for that.
That's pretty
And
cool.
so it also allows you to fill that space with batteries instead of having to fill some of that lower part of the car with structure. If the batteries are the structure, then you can stick more batteries in there.
Oh, that's a good point. So they can increase range as well as reducing costs.
Yes. And then it also allows them to further or like put the batteries even closer to this the center of the bottom of the car. Essentially, like a big part of why Teslas are so safe, and especially with their safety in like rollover situations,
Mm-hmm.
comes down to the extremely low center of mass. Like, I don't know if you've seen the crash test demos, but like Model X can essentially be almost on the roof and it will just roll back over.
Yeah, no, I have seen that, which is pretty amazing.
Yeah,
It makes it one of the safest cars in the world. So
yeah. And so this will like further improve safety as well as reduce cost. Now, my only question, like I mean, I assume they thought of this, but like I want to see exactly how with this they're designing the very bottom of the car to um, deal with the whole issue they had before of like, when Teslas first started coming out, they didn't layer the bottom of the car correctly, and so a puncture could cause like a battery fire.
right, I remember that.
And so
Yeah,
I don't know how the battery being a part of the structure might affect that.
right.
Um, Teslas are very focused on safety, so I assume that they will not risk releasing a car that has that issue again.
No, I wouldn't think so. And I mean, they've
But I just want to see
yeah.
how it's structured.
Even with that, they're still some of the safest cars. So,
Yeah,
are still the safest cars. I shouldn't even say some of. They just
yeah,
are. So,
yeah. So, all in all, it was like a pretty big deal. A lot of like their stock dropped after this event because a lot of people thought that the Battery Day event would be focused on like immediate announcements, and so the stock kind of inflated.
right, right.
And then it
And
dipped
now, and then
afterward.
it did because of, yeah, no, it makes sense. It makes logical sense, but
Yeah. It was essentially just people like in the hope of some big immediate announcement and a big cash out, um, bought into their stock, and then it dipped out when people were like, "Oh, never mind."
Yeah, which
So
is not surprising. That happens almost anytime a company has an event of non-immediate stuff. Like it's that investor hype.
yeah. Well, and I think that's why a couple days beforehand, Elon was like, a lot of this stuff is like 2 years out.
Yeah,
Because otherwise it probably would have been even more significant of a inflation and then even more significant of a drop.
yeah.
Um, but yeah, I don't know. We'll see. I'm excited for them to do the $25,000 Tesla. We'll see how long it takes for them to get there.
Yeah, I mean, I'm excited as well, but also I kind of want to be able to drive my car sometimes. So I don't know how much I
Yeah,
would actually want one,
but
you know. But
a $25,000 EV that is, got the type of range that Tesla goes for and would be um like the type of car even more people could buy.
uh-huh.
And then add in the fact that that includes full self-driving, like that is pretty crazy for the price.
Yeah, that's true. So I'd just be like, do you think it'll even still have a steering wheel at all, or did they
No.
say no? They did they
They
say
didn't
no or?
say, no, they
Hmm.
didn't say, but the way that he talked about it, to me, it made it sound like it was like, it sounds like it's going to be a full self-driving only car.
Oh, okay. Hmm. That'll be interesting. That'll be interesting to see if it actually happens. I mean, it's gonna happen
Yeah.
at some point, but it'll be interesting to see if it happens like decently soon. You know?
Mm-hmm.
So, huh? Interesting.
Yep.
Um. Well, does that cover everything for their event?
Yeah.
Alrighty. Well, it's exciting. Being a person that's also hoping to buy one at some point. I'm excited to see some of this come to like actual product, but for now, I think it's kind of it, right?
Yeah. Um, yeah, pretty much.